mindset in order to do that.
We were having some internet problems. I'm sorry, but now we're live everywhere.
We're here. Woo!
We're live. I may not be alive, but we're live. Whatever. Woo.
Well, you're making it. You're on the mend.
I am on the mend, and life is good. And I don't think it was something horrible. It was just horrible for me. So and I'm getting on the other side of it. But we're glad to be here. Teri, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah. It sounds like you might have had a little bit of a flu bug or something.
Yeah, something like that. Well, I was, you had made a post and it was something, and you used some of those big terms that I completely don't even know what they are, but I don't even know what they are. Some of them but it sounded like something we need to talk about. So the first thing I did when I talked to you this weekend was say, what is disenfranchised grief?
Yeah.
And I went, oh my Lord, that's so many people and so many times. Let's open that box for everybody, like a little present,
Let's just unfold that little present. Disenfranchised grief. Well, first off, let me just say that there are a number of types of grief, well over 30. And that is probably shocking to a lot of people. But what it all boils down to is that grief is grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
But disenfranchised grief, for me, sharing that with clients is important because there's a lot of grief out there that we experience that because a collective whole from a social standpoint, culture, social, family, friend group, whatever it is, they may grieve this collectively different than what that person is actually going through. So disenfranchised grief is when a person is experiencing a grief that society by and large does not agree with the lens that they're seeing their grief through.
Yeah.
This oftentimes is around death or loss. If someone dies by suicide, if there's alcohol or drugs involved, if, say, you've had an affair, you've been a mistress or what would you be if you're a guy having an affair? A mistress, whatever. You're a guy or a girl, woman or man. A mistress, a mistress or a mistress. And you've been with a person for some length of time and they die. And, there you're
not you're not really part of the family.
No, you're not. If when I've come in contact and worked with families or individuals who have been affiliated with someone or persons who have been in the public eye for some crime, and then their loved one dies, that family is not allowed to grieve the way that they would typically grieve because society looks at that situation and says, well, they deserve it.
That was unforgivable. How dare you grieve for them?
Yes. So that's a disenfranchised grief. And a lot of times at the holidays, even roll it back, even when people get divorced or their breakups, and your heart may still be navigating that. And you may have family or friends that are like, you're better off without them. Let it go. They're a loser, whatever. You're not allowed to grieve because people feel like they need to put on this performance mask and say it's okay when really it's not.
Right. If there are so many people who are joining us, grief during the holidays is a time also, just the not time. It's just not the right time for that, and you don't get invited to parties.
Right.
In the holidays, you don't get invited to the family thing. Well, she probably wouldn't want to come, or he wouldn't probably want to come because we're going to be all happy and we don't want him to bring us down. They say it's for the person that's grieving, but the truth is, you don't have to deal with somebody who's grieving in your holiday party. Michelle is with us on
Okay,
YouTube.
Michelle.
On Facebook, we've got Elizabeth and Corinne and Angie and Candy, and Elizabeth adds, "Ooh, I resemble disenfranchised grief on many angles."
Yeah. So, that disenfranchised grief, it puts people in a pretty precarious situation because they want to be involved with holiday things. And even if it's not the holiday, they want to be involved in life. They also want to be able to share their heart space with someone. But if you are sharing it with a collective that doesn't necessarily agree with how you're grieving, or that you actually, it sounds harsh to say, have the right to grieve, then you can find yourself in a place where you're holding it in because you're just not
Right.
you're not allowed to grieve the way that you want to. And then you'll start shutting it out and not sharing and isolating yourself, which can lead to a whole host of emotional, mental, and physiological problems.
Another thought, as I was thinking about this last night after we talked, you're that person who has passed the sell-by date on grief for most people. In other words, okay, it's been a year. You should be over this by now. It's been a month. Aren't you through this by now? It's like, okay, it's a week, let's get rid of the clothes and let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has a different expiration date on mourning.
Absolutely.
It's a different expiration date. I'm echoing with you.
You are. I don't know.
Did something get unplugged?
Are you still echoing?
Now I'm not. Okay. That was a funny little moment, wasn't it?
That was an echo. It was one of your angels echoing in.
I wanted to make sure that it wasn't that I was all pilled up, and I go, are you hearing those voices too?
You know me, I would have been like, what voices? I don't know what you're talking about.
I know that is what you would do. Oh, that's so funny. Elizabeth says, I've learned to share only with people I trust beyond trust.
Right.
And Corinne says, this is a different holiday for me. No family, no dog, empty house. Now that's another disenfranchised grief. Corinne brought up another one: when your dog passes.
Absolutely.
Your horse or your cat or your pet of many years passes. That is a really quick, people expect you to bounce back by that. Okay, aren't you over that by now? And I'm going to tell you something. It's been a year since a year, 2 days ago, that my fancy left me, my horse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still not over that. I still have a feeling of loss that I cannot quantify. I can't explain. And I'm not the same with my horses that are left. And I'm working through it. Mm-hmm. But and Corinne says, no, I'm not over Benny, not yet. And you know what? That's okay. But that's that disenfranchised grief that we're talking about. That you get to do that. Now let's talk about some of the solution to some of the disenfranchised grief. What do we do about that? Because I think many of us have been in that situation.
Well, first assessing the group you're sharing with. Now let's take it. Let's throw out a scenario, and we'll problem solve it.
Okay. Well, Denny Wade says, I'm still grieving over the loss of my Sam, a chow chow that I lost in 2012. Okay.
Absolutely.
Pet grief. How do we deal with that disenfranchised grief when the cloud comes?
Well, so for pets, a lot of times that, depending on who you're around, that may or may not be a disenfranchised grief, because, if you've got a family member that's like, oh, come on, it's just a dog. Well, okay, yeah, that's probably somebody you're going to want to throat punch and keep moving. But, and I don't mean seriously throat punch them, or maybe, I don't know, whatever your jam is, whatever works for you. I'm not judging, no judgment here. Being around, reaching out to people that you can talk to, reaching out to groups that you're affiliated with. There are a lot of support groups out there for people who have lost their fur babies. Reaching out to other family members or friends that have close pets, to them, and just being able to share your story, being able to embrace others as well. So that would be like on pets. Now, if we take something a little more serious, and I don't mean that losing your pet is not serious. I mean, but like most people, if you say, I've lost my fur baby, most people would say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I can't imagine, or whatever. There would be some sort of condolence on humanity's front where it wouldn't
Right.
be like they would just go, unless they're just a real jerk, and there are some people out there that are just like, whatever, they're animals. And I know you and I don't pretend to understand those people, but,
No.
um, but let's take a topic of someone who dies by suicide, or they
Mhm.
are drinking and driving and they have a wreck and they die. Okay. So first and foremost, getting help, however, professional help, if you need that, to be able to navigate that. Secondly, support groups are wonderful. Third, have your immediate tribe that you go to. And that might be
Uh-huh.
one person, it might be two people, it might be three people. I'm not talking about a stadium full of people. Being able to have a sacred, safe space that you can share these things. My loved one is no longer here, and I'm grieving. It's not about what your loved one has done or how they left. Okay. It's about the need that you have for the grieving process, because grief is what we experience. We go through grief, but going through grief is considered the grieving process. So
Mhm.
grief and grieving are not the same thing. You will grieve forever, but you will not always be grieving.
Okay. That's one of those, I need to sit in the corner and contemplate that whole statement. You will be okay, say that one more time.
You will grieve forever, but you will not always be grieving.
Okay, now what does that look like? What is that?
So um, I go back and think about my grandmother. My
Oh, okay.
grandmother, my grandmother who passed away when I was 19 years old. In the grieving process, that was a couple of years for me where I couldn't think about her. I couldn't talk about her. I couldn't, I could think about her, but I couldn't talk about her. I couldn't recant stories about her.
Sure.
Donna, who is my aunt, who is like a sister to me, that I know she's watched us many times, and she's my traveling buddy. And I know you know Donna.
Mhm.
Um, we went through a period of almost a decade where we just could not, if we started talking about her, which my grandmother, Donna's mother, we would just start crying.
Mhm.
We were still in the grieving process. Now I grieve my grandmother not being here, which means I miss her. I long to hear her voice. I don't hear her voice anymore. Um, I still grieve her, but I'm not grieving all the time. So that means that when I'm putting out Christmas ornaments and I come across the little bitty tiny chickadee bird that she had on her tree and I put it on my tree, I'm happy, but I'm also saddened that I remember her, and not saddened that I remember her, but saddened by the stirring of emotions. So grief wakes
Right.
up a little bit, right?
Right.
So that's what we do. No one ever replaces the void, even with our fur babies. There's not another animal out there that's ever going to replace your fur baby. You're going to
Mm-mm.
have other ones that are going to come in and they're going to be equally magical. But there's always that um, allocated place in our heart and our mind for that one. People the same way. So we
Yep.
we grieve, but grieving is that process of grief. So that make more sense?
It does. It does.
Okay.
And it's so wild that you say that too, because I went into a shelter after my Winston died. Winston was a miniature schnauzer. He went with me to voiceovers. He went with me to the radio station. He knew if I put my headphones on, he lay down and didn't move a muscle. And he waited. And like the minute I took those headphones on, he would get up and shake and get all his juju kind of going. And then I put those headphones back on and he would lay down.
Mhm.
He was my perfect dog, lived to be 18 years old. And when he left, I couldn't do it. So I went back to the shelter and that called me about a miniature schnauzer, which was on my list. And and the woman at the front, she goes, this is not going to replace Winston. And the way she said it, I thought, throat punching wasn't a thing then, but I really could have at that moment. I didn't even know about that. And I didn't even think about that being an option. And I said, well, that's about the worst thing you could possibly say to me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I realize this isn't him. I fully realize that, but there is a hole in my heart that's so big that if I start loving on another thing, and that's when Henry stepped in. And did he take Winston's place? No, but he certainly did take a lot of my attention away from sitting in a corner and crying, because Henry was a lot. And, that's some of the things.
Yeah.
And that's when you are in this immense grief with a person. I always say, get involved in something that's bigger than you. Once you get past, I don't mean when you literally can't move. If you can't breathe, I don't mean that. We all know that when it's the dark grief and you just got to go through.
You have to, you're just required to be still, even though everything in your body wants to not be still.
But moving into the next thing, I said, finding something bigger than you sometimes helps move you to something else. Even in a group of grief support, being able to share your story and say the names.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just really huge. Angie adds up, how do you deal with the anger that comes with the grieving? My sister passed almost 2 years ago, and I'm still so angry at her because she didn't have to die. She contributed to her death by way of her lifestyle. Okay.
All right. I would say, if I would tell any person, any client, anyone this, have a conversation with her. I get it. She's not here physically anymore. But have a conversation with her. Allow yourself to feel the anger and allow yourself to be okay with being angry. A lot of times when we have folks that move on, what happens is they don't, when we have folks that pass away, even when they have contributed to their passing, we, by society, we say, well, it's not okay to be angry. You have to they're not here anymore, and that's horrible. True, it is. However, anger is a very natural part of our grief. Now, I'm not talking about the 5 stages of grief, because I would argue that there are more than 5 stages of grief and they're not linear, but have the opportunity, get a picture of your sister if you have one, and put it where you are looking, not looking down at it, not looking up at it. Put it where you're looking straight on at it. Maybe you put it on a mirror or something, and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Just allow yourself to say everything you need to say. Now, people often will say, well, I don't want to put that bad juju out into the world. But if you're holding on to it, it's destroying you. Physiologically, it's changing your cellular structure. So you're not putting it on her. If she were here with you, would you have a conversation or a phone call or a text or something to say, what are you doing? Do you realize what you are doing to yourself? You can have that same conversation. Doesn't mean we don't love them when we're angry. It just means that there is something that needs to be said. And anger, at the root of anger, is usually, most always, hurt. Because you want someone to love themselves enough not to hurt themselves. Because when they intentionally hurt themselves by self-harm of any fashion, the family is hurt as well.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And you did an exercise, and this brings us to something coming up January 6th, which is our yearly reboot. We're going to have a get together. There is an exercise that Teri did with a phone. And you put it in a room where you could close the door and you pick up that phone and you have a conversation with that person.
Yes, I call it the recollection phone, but I've seen I've been doing this for several years, and I've seen in the last couple of years, there's like a lot of them around. People have them put up outside their homes, like random little phone booths. And I love it. I love that they do that. But that gives you the opportunity to call that person that you're grieving about, you're angry with, you are brokenhearted with, and it gives you the tangible of holding the weight in the phone. The phone that I have in there is an old timey phone. It's a rotary phone, so it gives you the weight. Then you hold it, and you can wrap your fingers around the cord if you want to while you're having your conversation. And
Right.
I encourage people, they can bring pictures if they want to, or they can just go in there and just sit. And sometimes people have gone in and picked up the phone, and they dial the actual number, physically dial the number. And sometimes people will sit in there in silence. And when they come out, they've shared with me that they didn't have anything to say. They just wanted to hear what the other person had to say.
Wow. That is so huge. So huge. Denny Wade Garrett. I love you, Denny Wade. Wow, Teri, I'm so glad to hear someone say what you're saying. I've lived this since I lost my grandparents in 1990. I lost all but one in 1990. The one was in 69. Thank you.
You are so welcome. You are so welcome, Denny. And I'm sorry. I am really sorry for those losses. And I know that, it doesn't matter if it was yesterday or if it was 2 decades ago,
There's, I always say it was for my dad to go 13 years ago and 13 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the same. Thank you, Teri. Angie says, I was meant to hear this today. I haven't been able to catch the shows lately, but for some reason I did today. Well, there's always that reason.
There is always that divine intervention that gives us that. And we're glad that you're here with us, both of you.
Part of that conversation in the phone, or when you start recalling them, for some reason in the last few years, I know when I'm getting to a good place in my grief, when the funny stuff really starts coming back to me.
Mm-hmm.
My little grandmother, and I'm going to tell you, she wasn't big on watching TV. I mean, we would watch, and this will date us, but every now and then we'd sit, and she liked Marcus Welby. She says, I like Marcus Welby, MD. Marcus Welby, MD. I like that. She wanted to be a nurse. She never got to be, but my little mama Cora. And Oprah was new, and she had a show on, and she was cooking in the kitchen, and she could hear the TV in the background, and Oprah was talking with someone about the G-spot. And Mama was just cooking, a little 4'11" woman. And then out of the clear blue, she sure wish I'd have known that years ago. Mama. It was just, and I hear those things. And so I encourage you that if you're really missing somebody right now, that the thing that you probably miss most is something that you shared that was a sweet memory, a laughing memory, or something. And that has moved me through so much grief, because we know if we have the belief system that we are moving on across the river, and I always say that there are more people now across the river for me than there are here. It's a strange thing when you pass that place in your life and you're a certain age and you go, wow, I wasn't planning on that. And I think about my mother who was 86, and I go, wow. But if you can find those joyful conversations and those little memories as they start to pop, it will bless you with some healing that you probably didn't even realize.
Absolutely. And sometimes sometimes there's been so many textured stepping stones put out, and history has sort of faded out the happiness, because we know that when we deal with folks, when there are people that we love in our lives that have addictions, or they have mental illness or whatever is going on, we know that a lot of times we want to hold on to those happy memories,
Right.
but historically our brain just there's too much acute trauma and urgency happening, and
Mm,
we don't have those peppermint patty, they're not there for us.
yeah.
So what I say to people when they're finding themselves experiencing that, um, get support and reach out to find out the tools and the skills on how to grieve that life that you had created in your head that you wanted, but that it did not happen.
Right. Oh, that's good.
You know,
That's good. Corinne always makes me laugh. Yep, me and my sister are the elders of the family. When did I get this old? I love that, Corinne. That's really sweet. The last disenfranchised grief. Um, you have a job, it pays your bills. You hate this job. But out of the blue, at the holiday, you get fired from this job. You get let go from this job. You get downsized from this job. They go in another direction. Let's talk about when you tell everybody, I got fired. Yeah, but you hated that job. Yeah, but you hated that job. Yeah, but I don't know what I'm going to do now.
well, so you know how my brain works.
I do.
And I'm thinking in my head that if you hated that job, you might, as we say in the South, might should have been looking already for something else or coming up. Don't cut yourself short with things that you can do. You have to be careful with what we put out there. And I don't want to shift gears too hard here and turn the steering wheel too far, but you have to be careful with that energy you're putting out there. So every day when you get up, if your first thought is, I hate this job and I hate the people I work with and I can't stand it, well, somebody with a higher power than us might just intervene and go, well, here, I'm going to make that better for you. Boom, you don't have the job anymore. But then instead of going, I get to start over, because that's a scary thing, right? Nobody wants to lose their job. It's terrifying. Money is one of the biggest security blankets that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have all the money in the world and still feel like you're poor and still continue to grapple. But if you can't find some gratitude in a job that you don't like, and if it's the people and it's the job and it's the traffic and it's the this and it's the that, then somewhere in that it's the this, you need to be putting yourself in there too, because it's you also.
Yeah.
So how do you handle when you go in the holidays and you say to a group of people, I lost my job, I don't know what I'm going to do, blah, 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 blah. It happens. It's unfortunate. But my first thing would be, I would ask the person, what reaction are you hoping to get from these people? Are you wanting sympathy? Are you wanting someone to support you? Not financially. Well, maybe you want that too. But are you wanting, someone to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What can we do? There's a lot of things. But first things first, let's ask yourself, why are you going into a holiday setting and announcing to a group of people you lost your job? What are you wanting from that? It's different if you lose your job and you call your friend and you go, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't have a job. Christmas is right around the corner. I'm stressed out. What am I going to do? Then you can start solution-based thinking. Well, let's call the food banks. Let's reach out to some charities and whatever. Let's get together and brainstorm about what we can do. And also remember, we have cultivated such a commercialized holiday that it is not about all the gifts and it is not about all the things. It's about the love, the peace of mind, and the connection.
Right.
And sometimes there are shifts in how we do things. And we don't see that in the moment. That's actually a blessing for us because we're down in it. We're marred down in the muck and we can't see it. So then
Right.
when you get your 75,000 foot view and you look down and you go, okay, here's where I am. Here's where I have been. And you know what? Here's where I'm going. And now I can see it. It makes sense.
Right.
I
think a big part of it too is separating, because while all grief is stressful, not all stress is grief. And if you're able
Absolutely.
to put the stress part, it's like, oh, I'm not exactly, I'm scared.
Hmm.
I'm stressing about money, whatever. I'm not really grieving. I didn't really like this job. I didn't really like going into that job or whatever. So I'm not really needing to grieve that job as much as I am just stressed.
And you might
How do I
grieve,
fix this? Yeah.
yeah, you might grieve friends that you had there,
Yeah.
you know, but you know what? You can still get together with them.
That's right.
But to your point about if you walk in a room and you ask, or you announce to the people, I've lost my job, and they say, what do you, how do they, and they say back to you, well, you didn't like that job anyway. Well, be forthcoming. You know what? You're right. I didn't like that job, but it's still a little stressful to unexpectedly be laid off right here at the holidays. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to process that.
Right.
It's not about, it's just about being able to share how you feel, without catastrophizing it. And I
Yeah.
will say this, I heard you say earlier when you were talking about your pup, you said his name was. And I always ask people, like, well, when he left, did we change his name?
That's right.
His
Good
name
point.
is his name is still,
Is
you know.
still
And
standing.
we have people do that. People will say, well, I lost my mother this year, and they'll go, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, her name was Betty, and it's like, well, what is her name now? It's still Betty. So talk about, share their voices, share their names, share their memories. You can do it with your fur babies. You can share, Denny's talking about, losing his sweet chow chow. He can share memories. Go back and you can share those memories with people. You can, the beautiful thing about grief is that once you step off into it and you start to navigate it,
Yeah.
you recognize that when the grieving process is starting to sort of wrap up a little bit is
Yeah.
when, as you said earlier, when you can have those memories and you can laugh about them, or you can,
Right.
you have that little flutter in your heart. It doesn't mean that, an hour later, you're not going to go, oh, I miss them. It just means you're not in that big grief wave, the grieving
Exactly.
wave.
Elizabeth says, I remember praying for something once and it came true. It devastated me and I regretted immediately putting that energy out there. Sometimes those
Yeah.
things come in that thing. Last but not least, I know we're getting overtime, but let's say somebody has an affair. You can't go to the family funeral because you're not part of the family. Um, there is a way to grieve a person like that. We're not judging you because you had the affair, because sometimes that happens. I mean, um, I didn't realize someone that I was seeing from another town was married. I didn't know. I found out in a horrible way. Then I was angry and I stopped seeing this person, but my love for that person was still very, very strong. And years later, he looked me up when he wasn't married, and I still couldn't quite forgive. I couldn't forgive that part. I could still be his friend, and I tried to help. And ultimately, his daughter called me when he passed away, and I didn't even know how to handle it because he was an alcoholic, and I wouldn't take his amends when he did it because he had lied to me in so many ways and all that kind of stuff. But I wrote it out. I literally wrote my story with him out, and I said
Mm-hmm.
all the things, and I took his amends after he went to the other side because I knew at that point he was truthful about them. And so for you all that have had an issue like this, I want you to bring your thoughts right here. I'm just being as open as I possibly can, and I normally don't say anything to anybody about that. His daughter and I have remained very close through the years, and ultimately there was a lot of healing and a lot of forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Even his ex-wife. Because I didn't know, and she didn't know. So,
Right.
uh, Jeff is with us. He joins us on Twitter.
Hey,
Hi, Jeff.
Jeff.
Love this topic, ladies. it's a weird thing. So if anybody else has been in this situation, Elizabeth says that hurt sticks around, and it does.
Mm-hmm. It does. And I will say on that topic, if you have found yourself in a situation, whether you didn't know that, this person was married or you did know,
You did, doesn't matter.
there's no judgment around that. The situation is whether they have passed on or whether they're still alive. Hurt is hurt and grief is grief. And there's no competition and there's no scale to, oh, well, mine's bigger than yours. So, if you find yourself in that space where you feel like that is a disenfranchised grief, you can't really go around telling your family and everything, like, oh, well, I'm so-and-so and da-da-da-da. Because a lot of times people, especially if you're having a quiet relationship, people don't know that that person even exists for you. So what you have to do is, well, you don't have to, but what you can do is find a way to grieve them, find a way to create that, sorry, my phone just is, I have my messages on my phone are a little heart. And so it just went off and I was like, oh, okay. That's right. Find a way, whether it's writing a letter, whether it's doing a burning bowl ceremony, and I'm not talking about smoking weed, but if that's your thing, knock yourself out. A burning bowl saging ceremony, writing a letter, finding someone that you can role play with. I do this a lot with clients, and a lot of times they have an experience that has happened in life and they can't change it. So we can interject ourselves in there. And if you have someone that's safe for you to do that, you can sit with them back to back on the floor. Or if you have, at my office, I have a blue ottoman looking thing. And so you can sit back to back where you're actually leaning up against one another, and you can exchange how you feel and what your grief is, and all of that. And that can be a safe space, for people. And don't be afraid to have conversations with these people, whether they are still on this earth or whether they have moved on to wherever it is they're going, because everybody got a lot of different belief systems out there. So wherever it is they go. But don't be afraid to have conversations with these people, even if they're not here anymore or if they're not in your life anymore. And when you're having these conversations, be careful not to ad-lib what you think they might be saying back to you. You're just having a conversation with them.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. For me, I went to a beach and I had some sand, and my symbolic way was throwing the sand out into the water. And it was, and have your own ceremony, have your own,
absolutely,
your own letting go. And it's not really, grief is your own road anyway. People think that you get through grief with other people, and you might have people, and you're like your soul tribe, as Elizabeth calls us. The soul tribe is there, but really grief is, when you get right down to it, it's going to be your own road.
Grief is a very individual process, and and you can have a lot of support, but no one can actually experience your grief with you because they have not had your experience. Even siblings. I work with a lot of siblings that will say, I grieve this way and I grieve this way. And their recollection of their childhood is not the same. But so their grief is not the same.
Right.
Their grief is different. But allowing that grief to happen. And also understanding that if you're in a place where you do have some hardened grief, and you're, maybe you're in a place where you're just not ready to grieve and to move on, that's fine. But if you find yourself in this place for a couple of years or more, that's not okay. Because at that point, it's not so much about the grief anymore as it is your attachment to the grief. And a lot of times people will say, well, if I let go of the grief, or if I let go of the anger, or if I let go of the sadness, then what was it all for? They're gone. I won't have that anymore. But no, what you will have at that point is peace of mind, and you will have a bit more clarity and balance. And in that comes a little more happiness. But sometimes we get really comfortable being unhappy. And when we're unhappy, happiness scares us because we've all been taught that happiness doesn't last forever.
Oh, that's good stuff. Elizabeth says that stings. Yeah, that might sting a little bit, as Teri
That
was
might sting
saying.
a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we're going to close out with a reminder. If you guys would like to be part of our January 6th Saturday event, it's going to be at Teri's office. And where can they get all the information? There are 7 spots available left in that. So how do they sign up?
They can go to teripugh.com and email me, or they can text me at 615-513-2700. Now I feel like an infomercial, but wait, 615-513-2700.
Empire.
That's shameless plug. And it's going to be January the 6th. It's going to be from 10 until 5. It is $149. There are 7 seats left. Bring a sack lunch. We're going to have a continental-ish type breakfast there. Going to have some goodies there. It's going to be it is an extended, it's a longer day, but it's a slower day. So we're going to really be present, and there's going to be a whole lot of goodness that we're going to be tapping off into. And, shoot me a text or go to the website and email me, and we can take care of your payment. And I can give you any other information that you want on that. And it's a come as you are. Well, unless you sleep in the buff, you got to put something on, but come as you are in your comfies. You can show up with no makeup. You can show up with your sweatpants on and your house shoes. It does not matter.
And we're going to have some plug-in electric little throws that keep you all warm. And we are going to be so cozy, and we're going to have a little fake fireplace because that's how we roll.
And it really is a day of reconnecting, reclaiming, and rejuvenating, and releasing. Most importantly, releasing.
Oh, and you guys, thank you so much to Jeff, Elizabeth, Angie, Corinne, and you. Let's see, I think I got everybody. You guys join us each and every week. And this is and Denny Wade, obviously, Candy, and I think I got it. Oh, and Michelle, who's on YouTube. And I said Twitter, but Twitter is now X. So thank you for joining us on X. And thank you for your comment. That's a wonderful podcast, Jeff says. And we've been here for a while, and we welcome you to be part of our wonderful January 6th event. And if you're not, you can still join us every week. We're here on Wednesdays, noonish,
depending on, what we're talking about right before we go on. So sometimes it's, sometimes we're chatting, and sometimes
we need to process.
Sometimes we just, get the link at 12. So sometimes we just have busy lives. What can we say?
My fault.
There's no fault in it at all. How many times have I been running back from the office to get to the house to do this? And I'm like, I'm coming in on 2 wheels, but I'll be there right at 11:59. It's all good.
EB says she might show up in comfy, presentable jammies, and that's fine too.
There you go. Just show up. We don't care what you have on. Just show up. Just bring your lunch and an open heart. That's all you gotta bring. It. So yes. So I guess our 27th show. Are we going to be doing a throwback that day?
I think we are. We're going to probably do an encore presentation. So next week we will not be here. So.
We will not be. Well, we will be here, but we just won't be live. So if you leave us comments and ask us questions, don't think we're mad at you. We're just not there. So there's that.
And for all y'all probably see y'all's comments from last year. So
right.
It'll be like you're here too.
That's right. Okay. Well, again, we appreciate each and every one of you sharing with us and choosing to spend your time and your noon o'clock hour, wherever that is for you in the world, with us. And we hope that you all have a peace-filled holiday. And we also respect completely that it's not always the happiest time of the year for everyone. And so creating a space for not only yourself when you're going through stuff, and also having an open heart for other people who may not be having an easy time. And instead of telling them how to be or what to be, ask them how you can support them, or just let them know you're thinking about them.
So good.
And on that note, everybody say it with me. Increase
Increase
the
the
peace.
peace.
That's right.